This episode of Budget MTG Decks is sponsored by TCG Player. If you want to buy this deck or any other Magic product, just press the link in the description below. It won't cost you anymore, and it really helps support the show. Hi, welcome to Budget MTG Decks. All Magic fun, all cards under $1. I'm David, and this is my beard buddy, Ruud.
Hey everybody, today we're going to talk about a fun and effective EDH deck you can build without breaking the bank. Now today's deck is going to be a control deck with some nice combos in it, even some almost infinite combos. We'll talk about that later. But as with our decks, there's just one additional build rule, and that is that all cards need to be under $1 in price. So this makes for very cheap decks. There's just one exception, and that is the commander. So let's take a look at our commander today.
And we have a very cool commander for you today. We have Niv-Mizzet the Firemind for 2 blue and 2 red. So for 6 mana, we get a 4/4 dragon wizard. Now, this dragon's got flying and a very cool ability. We can tap it to draw a card, so that's pretty nice. We can already has card draw on our commander. That's super sweet. And additionally, whenever we draw a card, Niv-Mizzet is going to deal 1 point of damage to target creature or player. So what is the role of this commander? Well, it's going to be to deal loads of damage to creatures and players by also drawing loads of cards with the rest of our deck. So what kind of cards do we need to make this work?
Well, at first, of course, we need to draw a lot of cards, because that's our synergy. So we have 20 of those that draw us cards. Then we have 9 protection spells. We need to protect Niv-Mizzet. 6 mana, so it's going to be hard to cast him multiple times. Then we have 16 removal spells, so some control. And then 16 utility cards, and of course 38 lands. We don't need a lot of lands because we have a lot of draw.
Sure. So what is going to be the ideal turn progression in a perfect world?
Well, turn 1 we will do nothing. This is a control deck. Turn 2 we will have a ramp card. Turn 3 maybe a counterspell. Then turn 4 we will bounce something or maybe multiple things on the board. Turn 5 we will cast Niv-Mizzet, and then turn 6 onward we will have a lot of draw.
Exactly, and speaking of draw, I say we jump right into it with all the draw spells. We divided the draw spells into 3 categories. The first one is straight draw, so these are the cards that are just basically straight gonna draw us cards. Second is rummage, that's basically where we first discard something and then we can draw something. And lastly, we've got some combo cards. These are the ones that are going to be able to combo off with our commander. Let's start with the first one, and that is a straight draw Temple Bell for 3 mana. We can tap this artifact and make sure that everybody draws a card. Now you may say, wait a minute, I like drawing a card, but I don't want our opponents to draw cards. That's bad. Sure, we don't usually like to make sure that our opponents can draw cards, but in this case, in this deck, we're going to be getting so much more advantage out of it that it really doesn't matter.
True. Then we have Fevered Visions for 3 mana. It's an enchantment. It's a little bit different, but it also makes each player draw a card at the end of their turn. But if it is an opponent that draws the card, if he has 4 or more cards in hand, he will lose 2 life. So basically he will lose 3 life because you also drew a card. That's gonna happen.
Yeah, pretty sweet. It's kind of like the Temple Bell, except we don't get to control when it happens, but we're dealing extra damage. It's pretty cool. Then we have Invoke the Firemind for X and 3 mana. So basically, we're going to be pumping 3 mana and then X into this spell. We're going to have Sorcery. Now it's going to allow us to draw X cards or deal X damage to target creature or player. Now you may say, okay, I'm really always going to be drawing the cards, right? Because after all, if we draw the cards, then we're also doing damage. So yes, I think in 90% of the times you're going to just want to draw, let's say if you put 6 mana into it, you're going to want to draw three cards and deal 3 damage. But it could be that there's a situation, like for example, your commander's not on the battlefield, that you may need to use the secondary ability of this card.
True. Then we have Stroke of Genius for 3 mana, of which 1 blue, and then X mana, we get to draw X cards. Actually, target player is going to draw X card, but it's going to be us.
Yeah, pretty much. Next, very similar card, Blue Sun's Zenith for X and 3 blue mana. So as you can see, these are all pretty much costed the same. This one's an instant as well, and target player draws X cards, just the same as a Stroke of Genius, except afterwards we're going to shuffle this card back into our library so we can cast it again later. That's pretty sweet. Remember that it's very cool that these are instant spells, which means that we can also use them kind of as instant speed removal because we can instant speed draw cards, and with our commander out, we're going to be doing instant speed damage to target creature or player.
Then we have a very good card, Mercurial Chemister. It has a lot of value. It is 5 mana, it's a creature, it's a human wizard. For just 1 blue and tap it, we get to draw 2 cards. So
nice.
Each turn, that's very, very much value. And we could also do for red, discard a card, and then this creature deals X, that amount of damage to target creature. So only a creature.
Yeah, so you're going to look at the converted mana cost of that card, and it doesn't really matter that we're going to be discarding a card because we're going to be drawing so many cards. There's going to be tons of cards that we can say, okay, we can get rid of it. And pretty much everything we discard is going to be doing some damage except for the lands, of course, which have no converted mana cost. Then we move on to the Lieutenant of Niv-Mizzet, always by his side if we're lucky. Storm Surge Kraken for 3 and 2 blue. So for 5 mana, we get a 5/5 hexproof Kraken. Super sweet, really difficult to remove because its toughness is very big, and it also has hexproof, which means people are going to have to do board wipes, which kill everything pretty much to be able to get rid of the Kraken. Not only that, if Niv-Mizzet is also on the battlefield, then this guy's going to get +2/+2, and then whenever this guy becomes blocked, we're going to be able to draw 2 cards. So people are up for a very difficult choice. Do I let 7 damage get through? I mean, it's Commander, you got a lot of life, but 7 is still a ton. Or am I going to give my opponent, so the Niv-Mizzet player, 2 cards, plus they're going to be able to do 2 points of damage to target creature player? That is also rough. This creature gives people headaches.
True. Really, really nice card. Then we have Thought Reflection. Kind of a steep casting cost. It's 7 mana, but we're going to go for the long game, so we should be able to pull this off. It has a lot of value again. If you would draw a card, you draw 2 cards instead. This is really nice. That
is going to get out of hand real fast. Then we move on to the Rummage cards. First one is Windfall. So for 3 mana, it's a sorcery. It states that each player discards his or her hand, then draws cards equal to the greatest number of cards that a player discarded this way. So that's pretty cool, because if we're playing really fast and we're getting rid of all our cards, and somebody else has still got 7 cards in hand and we're down to 2, then we play this, sure, we're going to get rid of those 2 cards. Everybody else has to get rid of maybe a ton of cards because they've been saving them up, and then we draw back up to 7, for example, in this case. So that is super sweet.
Then we have Whirlpool Warrior. For 3 mana, it's a Merfolk Warrior, it's a 2/2, and when it enters the battlefield, you have to shuffle all your hand into your library and then draw that many cards. It's going to get a lot of draw, and it does it again actually for 1 red mana and sacrifice this creature. Each player has to do that, so this includes you.
Yeah, what's also I forgot to mention with the Windfall is also the case with this Whirlpool Warrior is that it may seem like we're discarding and we're drawing some cards, which is cool. Some we're just replacing and we're not getting more cards sometimes. But remember that even if we discarded 5 cards and we draw 5 cards, that is still 5 cards that we're drawing according to Niv-Mizzet. So we're dealing 5 damage in that case, for example. Next card, Jace's Archivist. For 3 mana, it's a 2/2 Vidalcan Wizard. And for 1 blue and tapping it, we're going to make sure that every player has to discard his or her hand and then draw cards equal to the greatest number of cards discarded this way. So it's a Windfall on a stick, works the same way, except it's repeatable.
Really, really nice. Then we have Diminishing Returns. It's a sorcery for 4 mana, and each player shuffles his or her hand and graveyard into the library. So this is very valuable to us because we're going to mill ourselves, sort of, with this deck. We're going to draw a lot of cards. Yeah. A lot of combos that draw loads of cards. And then you exile the top 10 cards of your library, and then each player draws up to 7 cards. So this includes you, of course.
Yeah, pretty sweet. So we're going to be drawing those 7 cards when we're out, and on top of that, late game, it could be that we're going to refill our library back again with all the stuff that we put in our graveyard. Forgotten Creation is next for 4 mana. It's a 3/3 zombie horror with Skulk, which means it's difficult to block. But this guy's not here because we're going to be attacking with it. This guy's here because at the beginning of our upkeep, we may discard all cards in our hand, and then if we do, we're going to draw that many cards. So we're going to look at our hand and we go, is this really what we're going to be wanting this turn? And we can choose to get rid of it, draw that many cards. It helps us a lot in filtering through our deck, looking for those cards that we need. It helps us a lot with drawing a lot of cards because of Niv-Mizzet. All in all, perfect. Plus, it's a 3/3 body, so there's nothing to sniff at.
Nice. Then we have Reforge the Soul. For 5 mana, it's a sorcery, and it states that each player discards his or her hand and then draws 7 cards. It also has a miracle cost. This basically means when you draw it from your deck, but only if it's the first card you drew this turn. So normally that is, of course, after your upkeep. Then it will only cost you 2 mana. So this doesn't work when you draw it from a card.
No, that's true. But still, paying 5 mana is not bad. And remember, with all these, everybody has to discard cards. it's symmetrical, so you think, oh, it's not actually that bad for everybody because we're all doing the same thing, but it's actually much better for you because you get to choose when you make sure that everybody has to discard their hand, and when you have a hand that's not very good, you're going to make sure everybody discards, and when you've got a great hand, you're not going to, and your opponents most likely will hate you for it. Then we move on to Mind Moil for 5 mana. It's an enchantment, so this one's going to stay on the battlefield. And whenever you play a spell, you're going to put the cards from your hand to the bottom of your library in any order, and then draw that many cards. So basically, we're going to be rummaging every time we cast a spell. So you got to be careful with this because you may think, I got 2 good cards, but you're actually only going to be able to play one of those. Because you're going to play one and then you're going to have to get rid of that card, get rid of your hand, and then you can have new hands, you're going to play something else. But mostly this is just so awesome because with Niv-Mizzet on the battlefield, you're going to be drawing so many cards constantly. And it's actually not going to go into your graveyard, these cards, and they're going to be refilling back into your library. So you're not really milling yourself.
Then we have another one of these, but this time around it's for 6 mana, it's a 5/5 flying creature. It's a Swings Wizard. That's maybe even better, I think. And it also states whenever you cast a spell, you put the cards in your hand on the bottom of your library and draw that many cards.
Yeah, so it's actually the same thing.
But on a creature.
But on a creature, a little bit more expensive. Yeah. Also, you can attack with it, fire, but it's also more susceptible to removal. Yeah. Pros and cons. That's why we got both. Then we have Dragon Mage for 7 mana. It's a 5/5 dragon wizard, so this one's kind of the same as the Sphinx, but this time it's a dragon rather than Sphinx. And whenever this guy deals combat damage to a player, each player discards their hand and then draws 7 cards. So that is, once again, very cool.
Then we move on to the combo cards. I have the honor to tell you about this.
Beautiful.
It's my almost infinite combo. David hates it when I say almost infinite, but I don't care. Curiosity is the first one. It's for 1 mana. It's an aura, and you can enchant a creature with it. So you will enchant Niv-Mizzet with it this time. And it says that whenever this creature deals damage to an opponent, you may draw a card. So this does not mean combo damage. Also the damage Niv-Mizzet does. So whenever you draw a card, Niv-Mizzet deals 1 damage, and then you draw a card. Then Niv-Mizzet deals 1 damage again. And it's almost infinite because your deck is not infinite. And of course, when your opponents die, it also ends.
Yeah.
But that's still infinite, I think.
Sure. Then we have Tandem Lookout for 3 mana. It's a 2/1 human scout with Soul Bond. So when this guy comes in, we're obviously going to try and Soul Bond it to Niv-Mizzet. And what does that mean? That means if it's paired with Niv-Mizzet, then both creatures have, whenever this creature deals damage to an opponent, draw a card. So it's essentially the same as Curiosity. They both have it. Tandem Lookout, sure, maybe can attack as well, draw your card, but mostly it's there to make sure that whenever Niv-Mizzet deals damage, it draws a card. Whenever it draws a card, it deals damage.
And then we have Ophidian Eye. It's the same as Curiosity, but this time around it's 3 mana, and it has Flash. Could be nice.
That's a nice little surprise when people think, I'm going to remove it, and then you can play it in response to that. Pretty sweet. Obviously, once again, it's not infinite combo as good as infinite combo, probably, if you still got a lot of cards in your deck, or if it's late game and people are on low life. Those are the cards that draw us cards, and now we're going to move on to the protection cards.
We divided the protection spells into counter spells and shroud. We put counter spells under protection because most of the time you're going to use it against removal, I think. The first one is Negate for 2 mana. It's an instant, of course, it's counter spell. Counter target non-creature spell, it states.
Yeah, so that's pretty much everything except the creature.
True.
Then we move on to Disdainful Stroke for 2 mana. It's also an instant. It says counter target spell with converted mana cost 4 or greater. Now, a lot of times Niv-Mizzet gets removed by some big board wipes. This makes sure that all the board wipes are essentially, we can counter them. And you know what? A lot of the cool commanders are pretty expensive too. You can also just counter them with this guy if you want.
Then we have Foil for 4 mana. It states counter target spell. Pretty easy, but you can also, instead of paying its mana cost, discard an island and another card.
Yeah, so that is actually really nasty because usually people never, ever, ever think that you can counter something when you're tapped out and you've got no mana anymore. Yeah. However, this card is super efficient because of how it works in this deck. Niv-Mizzet is constantly drawing cards. We're constantly refreshing, refilling our hand, getting rid of cards we don't want. So we can always keep this card and an island in our hand plus anything else and just keep it there till the point where somebody's going to do something which would win them the game or make us lose the game, and then it comes out of nowhere, and people never expect it. It is truly a beauty to behold. I love it.
In this deck, it's actually just as good as a Force of Will, which is like $50, maybe something like that.
Yeah, it's pretty much as good because of the fact that you can make sure that you get those islands and such. Next card we have is Dissolve for 3 mana. It's also an instant counter target spell, scry 1. So we're going to be able to look at the top card of our library, see if we like it, otherwise keep it, and if we don't like it, put it to the bottom of our library. So that's a nice little bonus.
True. Then we have Dissipate. For 3 mana we get to counter target spell, and this time it's exiled instead of going to the graveyard.
Yeah, also good. Counter Flux is the last one for 3 mana as well. This one is also a counter spell, except it can't be countered by other spells or abilities, so that's pretty sweet. So once we say it's a counter, that's it. Nobody's going to be able to say anything more about that. So that's pretty sweet. It's also got Overload, which means you can counter everything on the stack, but you know this is never going to be relevant. So just see it as a normal counter spell.
Yeah. Then we have our first Shroud protection spell. It's Swiftfoot Boots. It's an equipment for 2 mana, and equipped creature has Hexproof and Haste. So it can tap right away for the draw card, of course.
Yeah.
And it has Equip 1.
Yeah, and this is of course not Shroud. This is Hexproof. Yeah. But all the other ones in this have Shrouds, which is I put it underneath. But yeah, it's Hexproof. Then we have Penance Aura for 3 mana. This is a really, really cool and versatile aura. We're going to pop it on Niv-Mizzet. Then we can pay a blue mana to untap it, which basically means as long as we have blue mana, we can keep on tapping Niv-Mizzet, drawing a card, dealing a point of damage, then paying a blue, untapping it, once again tapping it, dealing damage, drawing a card, as much blue as we want. We can also pay a blue to give target creature flying, not necessary, because Niv-Mizzet's already got flying. And we can also pay a blue to make sure that target creature can't be the target of spells or ability this turn, which means it's got Shroud. Cool. So for as long as we keep 1 blue out, we can instant speed give it Shroud. That is super nasty. And finally, for a generic mana, we can make sure that target creature gets +1, +0, or -0, +1 until the end of turn. Wow, that's complicated.
Well, wait, let me explain.
Yeah.
It's +1, -1, or -1, +1.
There you go. Look at that.
That's it.
You make it look so easy, dude. You make it look so easy. So basically, when we attack, we can actually pump its power up to 3 extra and make sure we get that extra commander damage if should we want to win that way. So that's pretty cool. We can pump its toughness as well to make it a pretty decent blocker.
True. Then we have Nurok Stealth Suit. For 2 mana, you can equip it's an equipment, and then for 1 mana you can equip a creature, and that creature can be targeted by spells or abilities. It also has an ability itself. For 2 blue mana, you can attach it to target creature, so that's instant speed. Equip is sorcery speed, and this is instant speed.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. We don't see that very often anymore. Of course, naturally, everything is equipped, but attaching is instant speed, which means as long as we keep that 2 blue open, we can keep the artifact on the battlefield, not equipped on anything, and then move it to whichever creature people decide to target, to remove.
Really nice.
Those are the protection spells. Now let's get started with all the removal spells. We divided the removal spells into 3 categories. Ones that bounce creatures or permanents of our opponent, things that outright destroy stuff, and stuff that is able to give us repeatable removal. Let's get started with the bounce spells. First one is Echoing Truth for 2 mana. It's an instant. We're going to return target non-land permanent and all other permanents with the same name back to their opponent's hand, to their owner's hand. So that means that if our opponents have the same spell, or a permanent on the battlefield, we're going to return them all to their hand. But it could also be that, for example, one opponent has loads of tokens. Then we can just target one of those tokens, and as the other tokens have the same name, we're going to return those all to their hand. And of course, tokens cease to exist once they hit our opponent's hands. So it's a pretty cool, versatile spell. We could also use it to return Niv-Mizzet back to our hand, should we want it.
Could be. Then we have Displacement Wave for 2 blue mana and X. Return all non-land permanents with converted mana cost X or less to their owner's hand. Also good against tokens and against low-cost creatures, so against aggro mostly.
Yeah, pretty fun as well when at the beginning of the game you haven't really hit your mana rocks, and then a little bit later you're going to be playing this for, let's say, 5 mana, and then pretty much everybody's mana rock is going to go back to their hand, which is pretty sweet. Puts us back in the game. Ether Gale is next for 5 mana. It's a sorcery, and we're going to return 6 target non-land permanents to their owner's hand. Now this has to be 6, it can't be 5, can't be 4, it has to be exactly 6. Sometimes you may need to target something of your own. Oh well, it doesn't matter that much. As you can see, the versatility with these spells, we're able to hit non-land permanents with all these, and that's going to be super strong because sometimes you got artifacts, enchantments, planeswalkers which you want to deal with. It's not always just creatures, so that's pretty cool.
Then we have Ether Spouts. For 5 mana, it's an instant, and it states that for each attacking creature, its owner puts it on the top or bottom of his or her library. So when you are attacked with a lot of creatures, you can bounce all creatures.
Yeah, and this is actually much better than returning to hand because it goes to the library, so they don't get them in their hand. They're going to have to redraw them. Again, it's pretty cool. Evacuation is next for 5 mana. It's also an instant. Return all creatures to their owner's hand. Now we're playing a very light deck when it comes to creatures, which means this is not going to hit us as hard as our opponents, and especially with people massing creatures, big creatures, lots of tokens, this is going to hit them super hard.
Then we have Devastation Tide. For 5 mana, this time around it's a sorcery. It also states return all non-land permanents to their owner's hand this time. So not only creatures. It also has a miracle cost, like I explained before. When it's the first card you draw on your turn, on that turn, it's for 2 mana.
Pretty sweet.
5.
Yeah, but it's still very, very strong, even though it's a sorcery.
Yeah.
Then we move on to the destroy spells. Blue doesn't really like to destroy stuff, but apparently blue can. So let's see what they got. Curse of the Swine first for X and 2 blue. It's a sorcery. We're going to be able to exile X target creatures. For each of those creatures exiled this way, our opponents are going to be able to put a 2/2 green boar creature token onto the battlefield. I say opponent because we're not going to be using it our own creatures. So essentially they got really cool 5/5 flying 2/3 death touch creatures with cool abilities. Now all of a sudden they're all 2/2 little piggies rooting around, being happy.
Really annoying exile
Exactly.
creatures.
Yeah.
Then we have a card that's going to turn our opponent's creature into a frog. So that's why they named it Turn to Frog. Until end of turn, target creature loses all abilities and becomes a blue frog with power and toughness 1.
Yeah.
For 2 mana.
So that's pretty sweet because of course we're going to be able to destroy that frog because all we need to do is tap Niv-Mizzet to draw a card, or we do it when we're going to draw a card anyway, or we got another spell that draws us a card, and all of a sudden we do 1 point of damage to that frog, and you know what? Frogs cannot take any damage.
True.
Then we have a very similar card, Ovenize, also for 2 mana, instant, target creature loses all abilities and turns into a 0/1. I'm going to say goat or sheep.
Sheep.
So you say sheep.
I like
yeah,
sheep.
it's going to become a sheep because of the picture.
Then we have a card called Turn and Burn. It has 2 sides. It also has fuse, so you can cast either side of the card or both sides of the card. Turn states target creature loses all abilities and becomes a 0/1 red weird until end of turn for 3 mana. And it also has Burn that states for 2 mana you deal 2 damage to target creature or player. So for 5 mana you can do both.
Yeah, and then you can kill it, but you can also deal the 2 damage to one creature, kill it, and then turn another creature into the 0/1 and draw a card and then deal damage. So it's very versatile. Next we have Mizium Mortars for 2 mana. It's a sorcery, and this thing is going to be able to deal 4 damage to the target creature we don't control, but if we overload it, and we recommend that you're pretty much always going to overload it, for 6 mana, it's going to deal 4 damage to each creature we don't control. And that is pretty much a one-sided board wipe.
Then we have the last of the destroy cards, Chain Reaction. For 4 mana, it's a sorcery. And this deals X damage to each creature, where X is the number of creatures on the battlefield. So for 4 mana, you're going to deal a ton of damage to all creatures.
Exactly. Especially good once Niv-Mizzet has been removed and everybody's massing their creatures. You wait for a little bit and you play this, and then everybody's back to square one. That is the destroy one. Now we're going to move on to the repeatable removal spells. First one is one of my personal favorites, Sigil of Sleep. For just a measly blue mana, we get an aura. We're going to put this on Niv-Mizzet. It states that whenever enchanted creature deals damage to a player, so it doesn't have to be combat damage, we're going to return target creature that player controls to their owner's hand. So that is super nasty. We're drawing tons and tons of cards, we're dealing tons and tons of damage, and we're returning tons and tons of creatures back to our opponent's hand as many times as we want, pretty much for every card we draw. That is super nasty.
Really, really good. Then we have Cowardice. For 5 mana, it's an enchantment, and it states that whenever a creature becomes the target of a spell or ability, return it to its owner's hand. it's gonna be really nasty.
Yeah.
Again.
Because just targeting a creature with 1 point of damage from Niv-Mizzet is enough for it to have been targeted, so it's a coward, so it's going to return to his opponent's hand. Remember that this also affects Niv-Mizzet itself, so if Niv-Mizzet gets targeted by something, or even if you target Niv-Mizzet with, for example, your Swiftfoot boots, then it will also return to your hand, so be careful with that. Next we have Willbreaker for 5 mana. It's a 2/3 human wizard. And it states that whenever a creature an opponent controls becomes a target of a spell or ability you control, we're going to gain control of that creature for as long as we control Willbreaker. That is, again, what's better than dealing opponent damage and returning the creature back to your opponent's hand? It's much better dealing opponent damage to your creature, and then all of a sudden we get to have that big fatty, and we're going to deal another opponent damage, and we get to have that fatty. We're going to keep them all. As long as we're able to protect Willbreaker, we're going to have control of all the creatures of our opponent. And that is, of course, going to give you a great, great chance to win the game.
True. Then we have the last of the repeatable removal cards, is Dismiss into Dream. It's a little bit the same as Cowardice, but this time around it's for 7 mana. And it states that only creatures your opponents control will return to their hands when they become targeted.
Yeah.
So that's a lot better, of course.
Yeah, and a lot more expensive. So
true.
Get what you pay for. Really cool. Those are the removal spells. Now let's have a look at the utility spells.
So we divided the utility cards into synergy cards, so they synergize with casting spells or dealing damage. Then we have the recursion cards and we have the ramp cards. The first one is Gutter Snipe for 3 mana. It's a creature, it's a 2/2 goblin shaman, and it says that whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, you do 2 damage to each opponent. It's going to be a lot of damage.
Yeah, exactly. We got, as you saw already, we got plenty of instants and sorceries, and we're also drawing lots of cards, so we're going to keep our hand full, so it means we can cast even more. So Gutter Snipe secretly is going to be doing a lot of damage, because remember, it's multiplayer, so we're going to have at least, 3-4 opponents. That's going to be a lot. Then we have Talryn Sky Summoner for 4 mana. It's a 2/2 Merfolk Wizard. And this one states that whenever we cast an instant sorcery, we're not going to be doing deal damage to each opponent, but we're going to be able to put a 2/2 blue Drake creature token with flying onto the battlefield. Pretty cool. We're not dealing damage, but we're going to get little 2/2 flyers. Very nice.
Then we have Docent of Perfection for 5 mana. It's a 5/4 flying insect horror creature. And it says whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you put a 1/1 blue human wizard onto the battlefield. And if you control 3 or more wizards, you get to transform Docent of Perfection. So you turn it around and it has a backside. And that is, David.
It is going to become a final iteration. Now it is a 6/5 Eldrazi insect with flying. It's also going to give all wizards we control +2/+1 and have flying. Well, Niv-Mizzet does already have flying, but +2/+1 is a nice little bonus. Also, whenever we cast an instance or sorcery spell, we're going to get another 1/1 blue human wizard token. But of course, these 1/1 wizard tokens are actually 3/2 flyers. Sick. Very sick.
Really annoying. Then we have Swing's Bone Wand for 7 mana. It's an artifact, and whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you get to put a token or a charge counter on Swing's Bone Wand, and then this artifact deals that much damage to a creature or a player, so to the amount of charge counters on it.
Yeah,
it's gonna get out of hand really quick. Only when you cast a spell, no copies of spells, only when you cast it from your hand.
Yeah, but do not underestimate the absurdity of this card. It may seem, oh, you can do 1 point of damage, maybe you're going to do 2. It's not going to go like that. It's going to be, oh, I got a turn. Okay, I'm going to do 1. Okay, I'm going to do 2, so it's already 3 damage. Then next turn, you're going to be, okay, I'm going to do 3, 4, 5 damage in a row. Then 6. And then after that, then every spell you cast is going to be obliterating an opponent. So it may seem like it's steep, but it's completely worth it.
It's going to be like 7 or 8 damage really quickly.
Yeah. Then we have the last one of the synergy cards, a Psychosis Crawler for 5. It's an XX. This creature's power and toughness is equal to the cards in your hand, which is pretty much always going to be 7 because we draw such an absurd amount. And whenever we draw a card, each opponent loses 1 life. So it's basically like Niv-Mizzet in the fact that every time we're drawing cards, we're going to be doing damage. This one does it too, but it spreads the love out to our opponents. But we can't do it against creatures. But still, super sweet. Then that is the one for the synergy. Ruud, bring the recursion cards for us.
The first one is Elixir of Immortality. For 1 mana it's an artifact, and for 2 mana you can tap it, then you gain 5 life, and you can shuffle this elixir and your whole graveyard into your library. Which is of course again very valuable because we're gonna mill ourselves sort of.
Yeah, exactly. It's not meant to be a defense against a deck that is particularly trying to mill you, because of course this card can just be milled into your graveyard. But when we are drawing and discarding loads of cards, we're going to choose which cards we're going to be discarding, and then we just make sure we got Elixir of Immortality in our hand up to the point where we think, that graveyard's getting kind of chunky. Let's put that back into our library. Next card, Archaeomancer for 4. It's a 1/2 human wizard. And when this guy enters the battlefield, we're going to be able to return target instant or sorcery card from our graveyard to our hand. Cool, whatever the best thing is in our graveyard that we might want to use again, let's do that. Well, for example, what's a very good target is a spell that returns all permanents or all creatures back to our opponent's hand. Why? Because we can play this, return that to our hand, we're going to play it, then Archaeomancer goes back to our hand, and then we can play it again to once again get either that spell or something else back. Pretty sweet.
Then we have Mystic Retrieval for 4 mana as a sorcery, and it also states you can return an instant or sorcery to your hand. But this one has flashback, so you can do it 2 times. In that time it will be 3 mana.
Pretty cool. Next we have Spell Twine for 6 mana. It's a sorcerer. We're going to be able to exile target instant or sorcery from our graveyard, do the same for an instant or sorcery from our opponent's graveyard, and we're going to be copy those spells, and we're going to be casting them without paying our mana cost. Then afterwards we're going to have to exile this spell. So pretty cool. One time we're going to be able to go, okay, this is the coolest thing I got, that's the coolest thing you got, I'm going to play both of those for free, and that is usually going to lead to some pretty extreme effects.
Then we have Charmbreaker Devils. For 6 mana it's a 4/4 devil, and it says at the beginning of your upkeep you return an instant sorcery card at random from your graveyard to your hand. So you just shuffle all your instants and sorceries and you get to return one. And it also states that whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, Charmbreaker Devils gets +4/+0. So it's going to be pretty quickly going to be a 12/4. So your opponents will have to block that. That's not really what the deck wants to do, but just a nice little bonus.
Exactly. I mean, I've had it a bunch of times that I've had Charmbreaker's Devil on the battlefield because I got it out early, and there were just 1 or 2 instants or sorceries in my graveyard, and they happened to be really, really strong, and then I could cast them every single turn again, one or the other, and that is just, it's brutal. It's really brutal. Then we move on to the ramp cards. First one is Sky Diamond for 2 mana. We can tap it for a blue mana, and it comes in tapped.
Same, but then red, it's Fire Diamond.
Then we go to Astral Cornucopia for XXX. Astral Cornucopia enters the battlefield with X charge counters on it. So essentially, if we were to pay 3 mana, this thing is going to come in with 1 charge counter. Then we can tap it and choose a color, and we're going to get a mana of that color equal to the amount of charge counters on Astral Cornucopia. So this one mana ramps us, this one mana fixes us. Early game is going to be able to just give us 1 mana, but later on we can put 6 mana into it. It's going to give us 2 mana. So it scales well. It's really, really strong every point in the game.
Really true. Then we have Mind Stone for 2 mana. You can tap it to get a colorless mana. Again, very nice. Then for 1 mana and sacrifice it, we also need to tap it. We can draw a card, but we don't need it anymore. Draw another card, do another damage.
Exactly, Niv-Mizzet likes drawing cards. That's why also Izzet Cluestone is in here for 3 mana. It can tap for either a blue or a red, which is pretty much all we need. We can also pay to and tap it and sacrifice it to draw a card.
Then we have Commander's Sphere for 3 mana. It's an artifact again, and you get to tap it to add a mana of any color to your mana pool. But you could also just sacrifice without paying anything, and then you draw a card.
Super, super sweet. Those are the ramp cards. Now let's have a look at the lands. We divide the lands into 12 islands, 11 mountains, and 15 non-basic lands. I'm going to start with Izzet Guildgate. Comes in tapped to give us either a blue or red mana.
Then we have Highland Lake, does the same.
Yeah. Then we go to Swiftwater Cliffs. It's the same, except now we're going to get 1 life as well.
Then we have Caldera Lake, also comes into play tapped, but we can tap it to gain a colorless mana. We can also tap it to get a blue or a red mana, but then it deals 1 damage to you.
Ouch. Then we move to Izzet Boiler Works. Now this one also comes in tapped, gives us both blue and red mana, but when it comes in, we're going to have to return a land we control back to our hand.
Then we have Desolate Lighthouse. It doesn't come into play tapped, that's nice. You can tap it for a colorless mana, but you can also tap 3 mana to draw a card and discard a card.
Yeah, that's actually pretty cool because that draw is going to trigger Niv-Mizzet. Then we go to Gaia Reach Sanitarium. It taps for a colorless mana, and also we can pay 2 mana and tap it, and then each player draws a card, then discards a card. Okay, cool. So we're going to be able to loot with this guy.
Really, really good. Then we have Lonely Sandbar. It comes into play tapped. It only gives us blue mana, but we could also cycle it. That means we can throw it out of our hand for 1 blue mana and then draw a different card from our deck. Yeah. Which is the same as Forgotten Cave, only this time around it's a red mana.
Yeah, don't throw it out of your hand. I just like discard it into your graveyard.
Sorry, yeah.
Okay, well you could, I guess. It's not such a big deal. Then we go to Vivid Creek. This one comes in tapped with 2 charge counters on it. Normally gives us blue, but we can tap it and remove a charge counter to give us also red in this case, or well, any other color we want, but it's going to be red. Same as Vivid Grag, but then the opposite. Now it's red, and we can 2 times make it give us blue.
Then we have Buried Ruin. It's a land, of course, and it will tap for 1 colorless mana, but we could also sacrifice it for 2 mana, and then we can return target artifact from our graveyard to our hand, which could come in handy. Maybe Elixir of Immortality, and we have a lot of other artifacts too.
Yeah, exactly. That's always a great target with that. Then we go to Rogue's Passage, taps for colorless, but we can also pay 4 mana and tap this one to make sure target creature can't be blocked this turn. Maybe those Charmbreaker Devil that got really big. Maybe a Niv-Mizzet that got boosted somehow. All nice targets.
Then we have Terramorphic Expanse and Evolving Wilds. They both do the same. When they come in, you can tap them and sacrifice them, and then you search your library for a basic land card, and you can put that one into play tapped, so you can choose which land you get, but only it comes in tapped.
Exactly. All right, well, those are the lands. Let's have a look at the conclusion. In conclusion, this deck is a lot of fun. I really love playing with Niv-Mizzet. What's really cool about Niv-Mizzet is that you're going to start out setting up your board position, making sure you got some mana, putting down some important enchantments, some artifacts. Then Niv-Mizzet comes on the battlefield. You haven't really done much. Everybody's kind of thought, this person's not doing anything. Let's leave them alone for a little bit. But once Niv-Mizzet comes on the table, and especially if you leave 2 mana open, or you have a counterspell, or make sure you got something to give it a Shroud, for example, some way to protect Niv-Mizzet, then you're going to go to town. Next turn around, you're going to start drawing cards, you're going to start dealing damage, then you're going to play another spell, you're going to draw more cards, you're dealing more and more damage. Before you know it, your opponent's boards have been obliterated. They can't leave anything on the battlefield anymore, because every time you're instant speed, drawing cards, and then dealing more and more damage, then all of a sudden you're also going to be attacking with Niv-Mizzet. It's flying, it's going to be hard to block, you're dealing commander damage. It is super fun to just have so many options. Oftentimes you're going to have tons and tons of cards in your hand going, what is going to be the optimum hand to keep? And I think that is always really, really cool to have all the options, and the fact that drawing cards, which normally is already such a great benefit, is now also the way that you're going to be killing your opponents. So that's it's a match made in heaven.
True. When you make it around with Niv-Mizzet, when he doesn't get removed, which is really valuable, so you should keep a counterspell, maybe only cast him when you have 9 mana, which is a lot. If it's possible, you can do that. Then it's just really, really big. You can also have the almost infinite combos. Normally I don't like infinite combos because it feels a little lame to win that way, but this time around actually I think it's a lot of control, and it really, really fits this commander, this color combo.
Yeah, and it's not infinite because you have to look at how many cards you've got in your library. At the beginning of the game you can't kill everybody, so it's not but
yeah.
Okay, well you know what you mean. Still very cool.
Really cool.
Also it's quite affordable, right?
The deck is only it's below $33, and we did the math. We calculated it on magiccards.info, and we just put all the cards together, even the lands, even the commander. So everything is included, so you can really, really get this deck below $33.
Yeah, and that's a lot of bang for your buck. Also, if you have any questions, suggestions, you want to talk to us, please just join us on Facebook and on Twitter. We're at Budget MTG Decks. If you have any questions, you have any suggestions, just let us know over there. Of course, you can always leave comments as well right here below this video. Speaking of the video, please subscribe to us. It helps out a lot for the most powerful decks and advice everyone can afford. So just make sure you hit that subscribe button. And also, if you do, don't forget to hit the little bell that's next to the subscribe button, because otherwise you're not going to get any notifications when a new video comes out. So hit that bell and you'll get notified when the next video comes out. Thanks for watching. I'm David.
And I'm Ruud.
And this was Budget MTG Decks.